A warning that could equally apply to the subject of our next item, though a censor might also add images of extreme violence to that list. For 2 decades, the artistic siblings Jake and Dinos Chapman have been exploring adult themes and challenging the boundaries of taste with childlike glee. Nominated for the Turner Prize in 2003, the Chapmans exhibited bronze sculptures of blow-up sex dolls and recreated horrific scenes from Goya's Disasters of War etchings in model form. A decade later, and they're still up to their old tricks, at a new show at the Serpentine Gallery in Hyde Park in London. Vitrines filled with tiny Nazi figures committing atrocities, stuffed animals having sex, life-sized mannequins dressed as Ku Klux Klansmen wandering through the exhibits. Some of it's old, some of it new, none of it comforting or pretty. I met the Chapmans at the gallery and started by asking the older brother, Dinos, how they decided what went in the show.
I think whenever we do an exhibition, it will always tend to be a slice through whatever we're thinking about or doing at the time.
You know, if the work is examining or poking the dark underbelly of the liberal order, the tendency to repetition is inevitable, really, because it's the same set of control parameters that are dominant, and our investigations will return to those ideas.
It's a massive subject. I mean, we don't need to kind of go off-piste. We've got plenty to look at.
And you say, Jake, you're poking the liberal order.
Well, no, just working out whether the claims to being kind of infinitely tolerant is actually true. You know, investigating the relationship between capitalism and democracy. You know, the notion that actually, as artists, we're implicated in the demonstration of Western freedom through the expression of artistic activity. You know, these things need to be challenged and looked at and tickled.
So it is investigation rather than provocation, as far as you're concerned?
Well, provocation, in a sense, would lend too much substance to the response to the work. I mean, in that sense, we would have to respect the viewer, which I don't think we do have too much respect for, given that we can't generalise them. I don't think we're interested in knee-jerk reactions from people who are not really equipped to actually answer or understand the questions that are being raised by our work.
That suggests that it seems like you're saying a lot of people won't understand the work. They're not equipped to.
We don't understand it.
You don't understand the work either.
No, Dinos doesn't understand
that. Jake makes the work for me. I'm his kind of test pilot.
The problem with the word provocation is that it refers to the lowest order of response, doesn't it, really? It's along the same kind of measure or the same sort of temper as the idea of shock. You know, if someone is shocked by the work, then they're experiencing a kind of a reactive response to something which has no movement beyond a simple visceral reaction. We're not interested in shocking or provoking to the degree to which there is no further investigation as to whether it's legitimate to ask questions about things. You know, shock isn't a very critical term.
No, but what about if we used other words and looking around the exhibition and in those recurring themes and the motifs and the scenes of horror in the concentration camps and those tiny figures crawling over a landscape and people being murdered and tortured, those things they're horrifying and they are gruesome, and you wouldn't argue with that, would you? You're taking issue with the way that people react to those images.
I'm not taking issue with anything. I'm suggesting that it probably, even in terms of the novelty of artistic entertainment, it was more interesting to see things of this level of activity rather than, you know, an exhibition based upon how happy mine and Dinos' life is.
How happy are you, Dinos?
Look at my face.
You look pretty happy.
I'm happy. I mean, I think the thing is, talking about the work. I mean, you missed out the most important thing. Is it's funny.
Yes.
You know, it's pathetic. It's two grown adult men engaging in an activity that doesn't deserve that much attention. We do things that are doomed to failure. You can't make a sculpture of hell without it being a kind of a tragic, ridiculous disaster, and that's funny.
And how do you know when a work is good then? When it makes you laugh? Because obviously you're not going to shock yourself or repulse yourself when you're making the work.
It's usually a good indication that you might find something ridiculous or funny.
And the perception from the outside very often is that Jake is taking it very seriously and you're just having a laugh with it.
Jake does most of the work. I occasionally turn up and go, yeah, that's nice.
Cheeky bastard. We're very serious about what we do, and the idea of humour isn't it's not compensation for seriousness. In fact, you know, humour is perhaps one of the most culturally appropriate reactions to things like death and horror and atrocity, not because it demeans it, but because it gives it a magnitude. In fact, it gives it a bigger magnitude.
Some people might think that the older you get, the more sensible you would get, or the work would possibly become less horrific and gruesome. But you seem to be upping the ante the whole time. There's a piece at the centre of this show, a film that you've made, which is one of the most horrible things I think I've ever seen you produce.
Yeah, I'm just bemused as to understand which world these people live in.
Which people?
Well, the people that would assume that getting older would make the work more sensible. And also that if our work isn't actually just a direct analogue of what's happening in the world.
Right.
I mean, what kind of odd sort of psychotic filter are people putting on if they think that what we do is somehow kind of eccentric? I mean, really, this is not odd. This is not out of sync with an experience of living in our world.
But there is a commonly held thought that you mellow as you get older. So you're not mellow.
No,
you're refusing to mellow.
I don't think so. I think
what people who are not very interested in life or the world or what goes on in the world do.
There are two questions about age I want to put to you, actually. First of all, because there will be people who, whatever they think of the work, they wouldn't want their kids to see this. They might wander in from the park. Are you quite happy for kids? Are you quite happy for your kids to see this stuff?
I mean, the idea of making art for kids makes art pointless. If the level of interaction is measured or calibrated by whether a child can or can't see a work of art, then we might as well rip all art up and chuck it in a big hole. Because if you apply that logic to things like philosophy, maths, literature, anything else, knitting or whatever, the world becomes a pointless place if it's determined by the intelligence of children, who we know to be pretty much moronic.
Is there an age warning, like some kind of age limit on the exhibition?
Yeah, the limit is no one over 18.
Yeah.
It's funny because I heard out there as I was wandering around, somebody turned to me and said, when are they going to grow up? And they're talking about you two.
No, they're not.
Point them
They're
out.
talking about their children.
Making sculptures of the Holocaust, making sculptures that refer to sort of globalization, the falsity of democracy, the notion of, tyrannical notions of fascism. I don't think these are the concerns of children. It's an interesting thing to mistake the medium for being infantile. I mean, Dinos explained the work in kind of layman's terms as potty training for adults. At best, we're doing what we're supposed to do as good avant-gardist artists. We're testing the liberal boundaries of the bourgeois elite. That's what we're here for. We're here to demonstrate that the liberal polity is very tolerant.
Right.
But on the other hand, what we can introduce into that kind of arena is a little irritant. It's like kind of maybe, it's like someone who hasn't washed their hands when they're putting their contact lenses in. Maybe that's what we do. We add a little wee-wee into the eye.
So
that really is in a microcosm, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
it's a microbiological theory of our work.
Yeah, it works.
Wee-wee
It's worked
in
for a while.
Optrix plus wee-wee equals our work.
Of course, yeah.
Jake and Dinos Chapman. Their new show, Come and See, opens today at the Serpentine Gallery in London. It runs until February next year. Finally, tonight,